Traveling the Vortex.
We've joined the doctors as they travel the vortex. Grab your temporal logbook. It's episode 532. I'm Keith.
I'm Sean.
I'm Glenn.
How's
How
it
is
going?
everybody this week?
Oh, you wouldn't believe me if I told you.
It's been hectic. It's that time of year. It seems like we've been trying to get together to record a episode for about 3 weeks now, and to no avail. But here we are, finally together again. Did you guys do anything fun in the interim?
We
I went
adopted
and saw
Shy.
Bob. Oh, congratulations.
Congratulations.
Sorry, I didn't mean to steal your thunder there.
No, that was way better than what I was going to say.
Yeah, after 6 years, it's finally official. So that's yay us.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
How's it feel to be a dad? Officially.
Yeah, I don't know that it's sunk in yet. I mean, nothing's really changed other than the legality of it. So that was
Yeah.
kind of cool, and signed yet another batch of papers. But beyond that, it was a little. I don't want to diminish. I don't want to diminish the process, because obviously it's it's a good thing, and it's for obviously this is National Adoption Month, and so for anybody out there, I don't want to diminish it at all. But for us, it was just very much like a whole bunch of legal people patting themselves on the back that hey, yeah, look what this good thing that we did is. Do you want to take some photos? And we're kind of like, sure, because you guys have been dragging your feet for 6 years. But yeah, let's take some photos. Why not? But no, it's a good thing. So we're happy. Shy's happy. I cannot complain.
Well, nothing I got can top that. So, Keith?
Hey, I can't really top that either. Black Panther, Wakanda Forever isn't that good a conversation.
But you saw it, though.
Oh, yeah.
We did see
I saw
it.
that, too.
Okay, so
It was good.
we've all seen
I
it.
enjoyed
We're
a
on the
lot.
same playing
We have
field
all,
now.
this is a first for a while.
Yeah.
I loved it. I thought it was quite enjoyable. I don't know that I enjoyed it as much as the first one. The first one is kind of unique in its own way, but I think this one did a tremendous job with filling the Chadwick Boseman size hole that was left behind with his death. And I think that the moves that are taken in this story were exactly what needed to be done in light of that.
Yeah, I agree, and it I think it's different in its own way too. It doesn't really feel like a Marvel movie either, and I think that's to its benefits. Unlike Eternals, where depending on who you ask, that can go either way on if it was to his benefit or not. But this, I felt like it almost felt just more like just a normal movie more than a Marvel superhero movie. I think that's the grief overtone throughout the whole story gave it such a different flavor.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I think it was interesting that it wound up being as meta as it was, and taking the loss of Chadwick and working that into everybody grieving for T'Challa, and then subsequently the journey that everybody goes on. One character in particular, I'm still going to be kind of cryptic here because I don't want to spoil anything for those of you that still have not made it out to see it. But working that into it didn't really kind of it worked out extremely well, I think, for plot purposes.
Did anybody know that was coming? That he was in
Nope.
this? Yeah, that was.
No.
I was very, very pleasantly surprised by that cameo. Done really well too.
Yeah. But no, I agree with you. It's probably still just a half step, maybe a step below the first one, but otherwise it was really well done. And Namor worked. But again, I'm the guy that doesn't know anything about comics. Yeah.
The thought occurred to me while watching it. The stark differences between this really illustrates the stark differences between Marvel and DC, of how DC handled Aquaman and how Marvel's handled Namor, because they're essentially on the surface they're the same character,
Yeah,
and they took them in such different directions. I really like how Marvel handled them.
I agree, and I think Marvel did the right thing. Now, that being said, had Aquaman not made it to film before Namor, I think that we probably would have seen a more stylized Namor like Aquaman. I think it would have been a lot more similar to the way they did Aquaman on film had it not already been done. I think that we would have seen something very similar. We certainly wouldn't have. I'm so glad they changed the name from Atlantis. I'm so glad that they kind of took the Mesoamerican origins and kind of made it part of the mythos of the character. But none of that. I don't think any of that would have. I think that their hand was forced on that. I don't think any of that would have happened had Aquaman not made it screen yet. If DC or if Marvel had been first, I think we'd have seen a whole different Namor than we saw.
I'd be very curious to read the original script. Apparently, Ryan Coogler commented that in one of the many interviews that he's been giving this month, there apparently was a draft of Wakanda Forever that was sent to Chadwick, but he was in such poor health that nobody knew at the time that he did not get a chance to read it.
Yeah.
And that after he sent it, it was like 3 weeks later that he was gone. And so that obviously forced a whole series of rewrites. But I'd be kind of curious to know what survived from that original draft in terms of Namor and the Atlanteans, or not, as they wound up becoming. But I think it was a gorgeous move to do it the way they did it.
Didn't Aquaman come out even before all of that happened?
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, no. But I wonder if that had, because I know that Namor was in the original. That's kind of something that they've been planning from the get go.
Right.
But I wonder how much of that. If
I would assume that's probably
what changed.
Yeah, I assume that probably all of that probably was the same. I don't imagine we would have seen Namor different in that treatment of the script. But
although what would have been different, I think, would have been T'Challa's reaction to Namor.
Well, entirely.
He wouldn't have gotten that connection that he did in the movie.
Entirely how who he dealt with as well, I think would have obviously been different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm excited now to see whatever the Disney Plus series they've got that's going to spin off of that coming out in a few years. I'll be interested to see how that goes. So,
Ironheart.
No, well, that one too. That was the one thing that I'm glad you brought that up. No, I'm talking about the Wakanda spinoff. There's a one with the I think Okoye and I don't remember who the other gal I think are in it. Ironheart. I'm glad you said something. That a lot of people are commenting on how Riri Williams didn't have to be in this film, and I think I can agree with that. I think you could have easily taken that character out, but on the flip side, they didn't do a job of forcing her into it. They gave her a reason to be there. She was the one that engineered that technology, and so her being the scientist made a lot of sense. I think that she's a bit underused, but I think they also made that choice because she'll have her series coming up on Disney Plus next year. And so I think they knew that they really just were kind of not even testing the waters. They were just giving us
laying the groundwork.
Yeah, they were laying the groundwork. They were giving us a introduction light before we got more of her story in the TV series. So, it did feel like she was a little underused, but I think I'm going to give them a pass because of what I just said.
Yeah, it was a pretty full script all the way around with everything else that was going on. So I don't know that there's a whole lot more that you could have done other than, the necessary introduction. I mean, technically, from a screenplay standpoint, you're absolutely right. This could have been pre-existing technology. There's a lot of finagling of the pieces that could have very easily been, we didn't need this character. But by doing it in the way that they did, it allowed them to kind of give a soft introduction before the show comes on, which is no different than what Age of Ultron did with so many of the pieces that it set in motion, with kind of setting up Thor 3 and even more of the Thanos connections and Black Panther and Claw. And I mean, there's so many little seeds that are planted throughout Age of Ultron. I think this one did it better, but it's a Marvel movie, so you've got to expect those layers upon layers.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Rupert Booth.
I am known as Paul Ferry.
And my name is Barry Williams.
Together, we host Time Ram.
Time Ram's a cruel mistress.
It's a random number generator.
That also.
We roll a number from 1 to 13, and that's our doctor. Then 1 to 300 for the story, and then we ram them together.
Even if it doesn't make sense.
Cruel, I tell you.
Time Ram, putting the wrong doctors in the wrong stories, so you don't have to.
You're listening to Traveling the Vortex.
All right, well, let's move on with the news of the week. Big news, we got a new announcement.
A companion has been announced. Millie Gibson will play Ruby Sunday.
What a name. Almost sounds like a Bond girl.
I keep wanting to say Ruby Tuesday.
Ruby Tuesday. Goodbye. We can say hello, Ruby Sunday. Yeah, it doesn't look like she has a lot under her belt. She seems like she's pretty young, but she's been on Coronation Street, and she got the Best Young Performer Award at the British Soap Opera Awards earlier this year. And then she's been on ITV's Butterfly, BBC's Love Lies in Records, and then on CBBC's series Jamie Johnson. So exciting. The pieces are being put in place, and it sounds like she also, I think I understood it right, is joining in the last special, right? Did I understand that correctly?
I never saw a clear word on that, so you could be right.
I don't remember where I read that. The article that I have up here doesn't have anything about that now, but somewhere I had a quote from Russell that I thought he said that she would be making her debut at the same time as Shooty. Huh. Oh, we darn. And I can't find it now. So I may be wrong on that. Either way, we'll get to meet her soon.
She
a couple
is
years
young.
from now.
She is 18 years old.
18. Wow. How old was Billie Piper when she took the role? Was she 19 or 20?
I don't know. I'd have to do some math. Some Googling.
I saw a comment somewhere that somebody had said that either her birthday or her 1 year her 1 year birthday was like the day after Eccleston regenerated into Tenet, and I went, no. I mean, maybe it's true. I don't know. I can't make the math work in my head.
It can't have been that long ago, right?
It can't have been that long ago. But I mean, we joke all the time about, the new series is X number of years old, and we all kind of laugh and go, yeah, can't be that old, can it? So maybe it is, but wow.
Crazy, huh?
Hello, fellow time travelers, and welcome to the Doctor Who Target Book Club podcast, the only podcast to discuss, in story order, all the Doctor Who novelizations. My name is Tony Whitt, and every 2 weeks or so, I'm joined by a 2 to 3 person discussion panel, including our so-called expert who's been a Who fan since 1979. That would be me. We also get the views of intermediate, casual, and novice fans who either have never seen the show or who have never read these books until these podcasts, including
Dalton Hughes
and
Alison Fitz-Seyfried.
You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you find good podcasts, or even ones like ours. You're listening to Traveling the Vortex, a Direction Point podcast.
All right, well, let's move on to our review of Temporal Logbook 3.
A traveler in eternity, the Doctor has touched countless lives, bringing salvation to some and agony to others, but always making a difference.
Take them one at a time,
I think we should.
but we won't do them in Doctor order. Let's do them in the order of the book.
In book order?
Yeah, it'll be easier that way.
Yeah, a lot easier.
This is one of those
that
few
way.
times, though, where there's a anthology book that shakes up the order of the Doctors. Seems like most of them tend to go in order of Doctors. So,
Which, for the record, I have no problem with that. That's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Did anybody else have a moment of, whoa, what? By jumping into a Fifth Doctor story?
Well, not only jumping into a Fifth Doctor story, but a Fifth Doctor story involving a First Doctor companion.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. Well, the first one is These Unwelcome Guests, A Tale of the Fifth Doctor by Luke Dyer. What'd you guys think?
I like this one quite a bit.
I did as well. I thought it was well written. I thought it had a fun plot. I enjoyed.
I don't know if I'd call it fun.
Yeah.
Well, maybe fun is not the word I was looking for. A satisfactory adventure.
I thought I enjoyed it. It was an interesting take on revisiting a companion years down the road. I think my problem perhaps was the Doctor being so, at least seemingly being so headstrong to go back and try to fix it, you know what I mean? Or seemingly trying to go back and fix it. And is it Polly's is it?
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah,
Dodo.
Polly. Yeah.
Dodo.
Well, it was Dodo, but Polly's the one that came and visited her, wasn't it? Who was who was with her that was trying? Was Tegan, right?
Ben,
No.
right?
Was it Tegan? Who was
This
the
is what
one that?
happens
Who
when we
was the
take
one
too
that?
long to get
who-
together.
Who is the companion that was trying to pretty much convince him that it wasn't a good idea to go? It was Tegan, yeah.
No, it's Turlo.
No, it was Turlo.
Oh, it was Turlo. Yes, I'm sorry. It was Turlo. Yeah, it was Turlo desperately trying to convince the Doctor that it was not a good idea. It just felt a little out of character, even for the Fifth Doctor, who I think could be stubborn and headstrong in his own sort of way, not Sixth Doctor way, but Fifth Doctor in his own way. But to me, it was a little out of character for the Fifth Doctor for me to be that, what am I looking for? He was being reckless, and I felt like I could see the Doctor maybe being a little reckless, and then kind of realizing sooner that what he was attempting to do wasn't a good idea, and it didn't require a Turlo to convince him otherwise, and of all people to have Turlo convince him that he was doing something wrong was an interesting choice as well. But overall, I thought the story was good, and it was an interesting look on a past companion in the future. And I think the author here tries to apologize for the way that I think Dodo's treated, especially with the unceremonious dumping of the character. But it just somehow didn't work. Maybe because it was the Fifth Doctor. Maybe if there had been, say, maybe if the 12th Doctor or the 6th Doctor had been in this position, I could see them being a little more, at least, stalwart about it. It didn't feel right for the 5th Doctor.
Yeah, I could see that being a little odd for the Fifth Doctor. For me, it kind of gets a little added bump by when I read it. I read it a couple days or the day that I watched Power of the Doctor. So I had all those nice companions coming back with the support group at the end of it. And then this story in the back of my mind of, oh, poor Dodo. So it hit the feels, made the story hit the feels a little stronger and made me appreciate the story a little more.
You had briefly mentioned that when we were reviewing, I remember.
Yeah.
I feel like I got to disagree with Glenn. I think the Fifth Doctor, this is set at an interesting time in their timeline. We open, he's rummaging through this box of goodies, and Turlough kind of makes I don't remember if it's an actual comment or if it's a passing reference to the fact that Tegan has left.
Yeah,
to kind of set where we're at in the timeline here.
It certainly was right after Tegan left, yes.
And so he's just had Tegan left. Nyssa has left, and Adric. That's still something that I think is haunting.
Adric didn't leave.
No, he involuntarily left. That's not even accurate. He stayed behind to pilot the ship. But there's a hole there, and I think we get accustomed to the foppish charm of the Fifth Doctor, and don't necessarily focus too much on the anguish elements of him. And this is kind of hitting right at that bump, and he is like the TARDIS. He's drifting, and Turlough recognizes that, because Turlough spent so much time drifting. So I thought it was a good pairing of those two at that point in time to I could see the Fifth Doctor doing this very easily. And while he, if one of the, now it's interesting you said it was Tegan earlier, because if Tegan had been the companion in this story, she'd have talked him out of it.
Yeah.
She'd have badgered him out of it. But
well, she would have been more poignant about it.
Yeah.
Turlough seemed to be softly trying to convince the Doctor, at least at first, that it wasn't a good idea.
Well, and Turlough's still recognizing that he's on steady ground in a way with the Doctor because of his background. So those, I think, are all elements that kind of piecemeal together made it work for me, that it was like, yeah, I can totally see the Fifth Doctor doing this. This is when he strides off doing his, I'm going to do something, and it's like, do we think that's a good idea or not?
See, I likened it to when we did the Time Lord Victorious story arc, when the 10th Doctor goes off and becomes very un-10th Doctor like, and I felt the same way here, that 5 was just being very un-5th Doctor like, and it just didn't work. Your reasoning behind why he did it is sound, Sean. I'll give you that. I can see why it doesn't have a problem with but it just, there is nothing in the 5th. Well, I suppose, was that story that we did Axis
Axis of Infinity.
That's it. Axis of Infinity had the Doctor kind of go off the deep end a bit. The 5th Doctor go off the deep end a bit.
Oh wait, is that the really horrible one that none of us liked?
Yeah, the one with the alternate timelines that dump into like a repository, and it was a bit flippant with its realities, but yeah.
That's not the creeper one with Aramim.
No,
that's the one I was thinking.
Well,
no.
It had Aramim in it.
I don't think so.
It had Aramim in it.
I don't think it was a creeper one.
No, I don't think it was a creeper one. Whatever, either way, but yeah, it was out of character.
We have reached the age where they all blend together. I can't wait to go back and redo this whole podcast from day one, because it'll all be new to me.
Let's move on to Lament, A Tale of the War Doctor, by somebody we all know, Sean Collins. Yeah, I think you copied this. You copied this for something. I read this before this. I read this somewhere before.
He had
you got an advanced copy of it.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, I had proofed it. Yeah, that's right. No, I sent.
Really familiar.
It had been
that Sean guy is such a hack.
But honestly, it had been so long ago that I started reading it, and I did initially go, why is this familiar? And then it occurred to me that, this actually, before I even knew your name was on, I mean, I didn't pay that close attention when I got to it. And I was like, why does this sound familiar? And then it occurred to me, oh, wait, this is Sean's story. Okay, now I remember I've already read this. We'll just say it publicly. I commend you on this story. This is a really good story. And I think what I like most about it is it has the War Doctor address what his role in everything is. He sort of steps back and gets a grave look at why and what he's doing. And I think that's something that nobody's really kind of done with the War Doctor, at least in things that we've reviewed or been, in experience with so far. There may be others out there that have done that, but I think you do a nice job of allowing the War Doctor to sort of step back and see, maybe give him a bit of a re-energizing him for why what he's doing is the right thing to do, the wrong thing to do at the right time. If that makes sense.
Yeah, very, very much so. It was. I mean, everybody has when you do fan fiction, you always kind of go, well, wouldn't it be cool if? And you kind of come up with that moment. I want to do the moment just before this moment that we all know, because that's been a story.
Right.
So you want to do this moment, and that was one of the inputs to kind of go. It's like, what finally made him decide enough is enough, and it's time to drag the moment out of the archive.
Yeah.
Well, I like that it's not some big bombastic thing. It's a quiet moment with another person
with the
mourning,
grieving.
Yeah, and the grief of the Time War and this giant cemetery planet, and the ramifications of just that idea alone is enough to kind of send him off to go do it. But then his interactions with her is also adds fuel to that fire. So I thought it was all very well handled.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was a little worried that maybe I was going to come across as corny.
Oh no,
the actual, it's one thing that you can throw all kinds of stuff at the Doctor and he can take it, but then to have somebody else try and verbalize that grief, I didn't know if that was going to work or not. So,
no, I don't think so at all. My only critique, and I maybe said this when I was proofing it for you the first time, but I think, and this isn't just you. There is a lot of authors in this book that are guilty of this. I think that you are sometimes guilty of overstating things, maybe over describing things. You're being a little too descriptive about things, and it's not just you. There are probably at least a handful of authors in this that will come across that I feel like got a little too, not quite Stephen King wordy, but a little too wordy with their, descriptors. I think
just trying to be Stephen King,
right? And I think that some things need to be painted. A picture needs to be painted by words in somebody's mind in order to convey a scene or a element within the story. But I think also some people kind of unnecessarily push that. I don't think you were as bad. There are moments where I felt it, but there were moments where obviously you just kind of got to the point. But I think that some writers can be guilty of kind of overemphasizing the narrative of what I'm supposed to be looking at or feeling at the time, and you, to be honest, you're a little guilty of that occasionally in here. I wouldn't say the whole thing's that way, but when you're painting a picture, you're using lots of colors.
I never met a descriptor I didn't like. Yeah, no, you're not wrong, and that is something that I tend to write. I think the same way that I write when we do short films. I tend to write the script, and it's this. And then you have to put the producer hat on and say, no, we can't afford a car crash and a giant robot. It's a 5-minute short film that we're doing with our buddies behind the garage. There's no way to film that. And in many ways, I am very grateful for our wonderful editor, Mr. James Sylvester, because yes, the first draft was even wordier, and he kind of reined me in a little bit. So you're not wrong.
All right, well, let's move on to the next
I'm
one.
glad you guys liked it.
Yes, very much so. The New Doctor, A Tale of the 12th Doctor by Paul Burns. I'm trying to remember what happened to this. It's been so many weeks since I read this.
I think this is the one where.
Oh, it's the
Yeah,
girl.
this-
It's the
where
student.
he's
Yeah.
teaching at the university.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and he picks up this quasi companion for a trip, and she kind of they wind up switching minds for a little bit,
Yeah,
and then things. I'm trying to remember. That's all I remember of it.
Well, there was some sort. They went off to one planet for him. Well, he went off to go take care of something at a planet, which was really kind of a minute thing. It was a simple task for him, but she ended up stowing away, inadvertently stowing away. She just kind of followed him in, and he didn't. Of course, much like the child in that one story with the son that was going nova, he didn't realize that she was there, but also sort of did realize she was there. Kind of that weird aloof moment that he has sometimes. But they ended up there, and they picked up some sort of mind parasite or whatever that is what switched their ideas, or switched their personas basically. But what I thought was cool about it was the fact that she's actually suffering from she cancer, right? And so she's living her last days, and she's also had this falling out with her mother, who never really understood when she was transitioning. And so I thought it was really kind of cool that she sort of got to live out a life that maybe would have, she got a moment to really kind of be a hero and escape from the realities of what was happening to her and the anguish that she was feeling that you don't really even get that from her until much later in the story that she's going through this, and she just seems like this yappy young interesting lady that is very interested in what the Doctor has to say, and it really comes around just full circle, and I really, really like that. I also liked, and I had to go I really did have to go investigate this a little bit. I do like that she met the one gal that played I don't know if you guys know this, the actress that she meets, that she says that just got a part, because I think they went back to 1980 something, that had just gotten a role on I think it was Coronation Street. She apparently, that actress played a trans character that which I think she's the first trans character on a soap opera in the UK at least, and the character later down the road ends up with a terminal cancer, and her final story deals with her. It's not assisted suicide. It's basically the being able to, the right to take your own life when you know that you have nothing left. So that's kind of the nod to that when she's talking about that. I had to go kind of investigate that a little more, because I thought this person must be somebody significant in real life, and that's who it is. I can't remember the actress's name now. I could when I looked it up like 2 or 3 weeks ago, but
I like the fact that a young version of her, of Eden, is at this event and is rescued by the Doctor, and that kind of is also what sets her on this path.
Right.
That was a very nice bootstrap.
Right, I had forgotten about that she was sort of involved that way. I do like that the mother didn't get a pass either at the end when she comes, because it so easily could have been the Doctor sympathizing with her because she's realized that it's too late and that she didn't connect with her daughter sooner, and I like that the doctor didn't really give her a pass on that. Still made her understand how terrible her actions were in her daughter's life. So I was kind of grateful for that, because a lot of times these stories defer to this whole giving a little bit of sympathy to that character, even though they were too late to realize how important their child was or whatever.
That was probably the for me, that was some of the strongest part of the story, was when the 12th Doctor was the 12th Doctor. It just oozed Peter Capaldi.
Yeah,
I mean, he just, he was there in the inflections and the tone and the mannerisms, and very much, came right off the page. And that scene in particular, yeah, I can imagine those attack eyebrows being furrowed very disapprovingly at this woman. So yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, the downside of the overall story is we don't get the 12th Doctor as the 12th Doctor for very much in it.
Right.
It's kind of the bookends of it all, since they switch personas or midway through.
Well, let's move on to Technical Advisor, A Tale of the Third Doctor by Matthew. I'm going to say his name wrong, but I think it's Kressel. I think that's how you say it.
This was a hoot.
Yeah.
I both had fun reading this one, and also the overall
resolution of it, I felt disappointed by.
Yes, yeah,
and the villain of it, I felt disappointed by.
Absolutely.
But the ride leading up to that, I absolutely loved.
Agreed, 100%. That's where I land with it. It's not a good story once you get to the end of it, because then it's just a revenge plot and a guy who thinks that his son's weak because the resolution, it was almost like there was a good story in the making here, and then the villain became very run of the mill, and that was disappointing. But I did enjoy the ride. I would agree that it was a lot of fun going along. And imagine being the director, obviously it's revealed is the bad guy in this, but imagine being that producer where you're just somebody's funneling you money to just write a science fiction story about some events that you're just being fed the information and cashing the check later.
I really suspected the Master was going to be revealed as the power behind the scenes, right? Because it just seemed like such a nutty Roger Delgado plot that he was going to show up right at the end and go, yeah, I gotcha. And, or I needed them to build this ship so that I could do this. And,
right.
It felt so very much like a Third Doctor story until we got to the resolution. And I don't know if that maybe tempered some of my disappointment with the way that it was resolved. And I had to kind of keep reminding myself that, the theme of the entire series is changed lives. So it's not just going to be a regular Doctor Who story. There has to be an impact of somebody with how the Doctor, for better or for worse, meddled with and impacted their lifespan. But that's the only downside to it. It's just a good story in the making. It was so close. It was right there because it was so much fun, and it was so much very steeped in the era. It felt like the Third Doctor. It sounded like him and Liz, and
it was so cool having a story set later where Liz is coming back.
Yeah,
and he even references Sarah, I think.
He said he referenced Joe for sure.
Was it Joe?
I don't think he referenced Sarah.
But it felt like
I assumed
almost in between that.
Yeah, I assumed it was between Joe Grant. Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, that's what I thought too. I think though that, and these certainly don't have to. I mean, these are charity pieces, and forgive me, but for all intents and purposes, they're kind of glorified fan fiction. But I don't think that would necessarily gel with the fate of Liz and other pros, but I don't think it has to. It's how much prose and extended universe stuff contradicts each other anyway.
How many times have we found Atlantis?
Right.
That's true.
Well, that's in the show proper too.
Yeah.
How many times has the Earth been destroyed by solar flares?
It's been rebooted.
Solar flare. That's what I meant, not nova, sun going nova. When I was talking earlier. All right. Well, let's move on to the heart of the matter, which is a tale of the Sixth Doctor, and this was written by. Forgive me, authors, if you're listening to this and I'm butchering your names, but Greg Mugan, maybe. Frobisher. You don't get much with Frobisher these days.
Yeah, that's true.
This guy, he brought Frobisher back, albeit not. I mean the Sixth Doctor and Frobisher, to be quite frank, are minor characters in this story. They're very well. The Sixth Doctor for sure is certainly very important to this story because he keeps re-encountering this guy. But I mean, they really kind of take second fiddle to everything that is happening to this guy.
And I can't tell if that's a good thing or not. Like, part of me feels like it seems like this author was given, okay, here, you write a Sixth Doctor story. And the guy goes, man, why did I draw that short straw? Okay, I'm just not going to have him in it much.
Right.
And I'm not saying I don't like the Sixth Doctor. I like the Sixth Doctor just fine, but most of fandom doesn't. I mean, the people who like him and would want to write about him are, I think, fairly a small minority. So that's kind of why I don't know if that impression of fandom, having that impression of him, is having me put that imprint on the story. But yeah, the Doctor is barely in the story.
I think the only thing I could counter to that, because I see your point, and I think you might be right to a point. The only thing I would counter that is when the Doctor does show up, it very much is the Sixth Doctor. He very much has the characteristics of Six, and I think that this guy captures that really well. And so you may still be right. He may have decided to, and maybe he's just putting the stereotypical elements to the Sixth Doctor in these short briefs, and maybe that was a way, to kind of to cheat or get around having to write for this Doctor. But he certainly does get the Sixth Doctor right.
Yes, he does. And he does write a good story. It's very enjoyable of this guy's life going throughout the universe.
I don't know about you. I think you're using the wrong word there too. I don't know if it was enjoyable. I mean, it was a joy to read it, but it wasn't an enjoyable.
His life wasn't enjoyable.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, his life certainly was not enjoyable. Yeah,
you had the worst luck.
Talk about a series of misfortunate incidents.
You were born under a bad sign, my friend.
Now, to be fair, he was trying to get out of the type of life that he was leading, to be fair, but he wasn't trying really hard because especially in that last time when he's going, just one more job and then I can get out of this. And I thought, no, just turn around and walk away now. You should have known better by now. Look at everything that has happened to you so far. Just walk away. You don't have to do this last job. Just disappear. Just don't leave a trace behind and just go somewhere and live a quiet life.
It's that gambling addiction process.
Yeah.
Like, maybe this will be the hand.
Yeah,
just one more hand. This will be the slot machine that pays off. One more quarter.
I'll hit sevens this time. Yeah. No, it's a good story. It's well written, and I don't have a bad thing to say about it.
Yeah, my only complaint is that the Doctor wasn't in it enough, but it's structured and presented in a way that it if it weren't the Sixth Doctor, I probably wouldn't think as much on it. But because it is, it makes me go, oh, I bet that was why he wrote it that way.
All right, let's move on to The Last Tomb, A Tale of the 11th Doctor by Alison Winter.
I really enjoyed this one too.
But
of course, it's an 11th Doctor.
Well,
when I thought of you when I was reading it.
When I started, I really enjoyed this too. But when I was reading this story, my first inclination was, oh, Keith's going to like this because, and then I thought, well, maybe I'm just defaulting to the fact that it's 11th Doctor and that's his Doctor. But the more I read it, this story is very much what you like about the 11th Doctor era, I think. I may be misspeaking.
Yeah.
But
no, yeah, it definitely is.
This story really kind of captures the Time Team in such a way that this could have been an episode in the 11th Doctor's series, one of his 3 series. It very much felt like an 11th Doctor episode of the show to me. And I think I kept thinking, I know what, this is why Keith likes this, because this is all of the elements about that era that I can see Keith, fell in love with. And so I thought the same thing.
Yeah, it ticks all those boxes of everything I love from the 11th Doctor's era. Plus, I think it's got a nice story to it, especially around Leonard and all of the stuff he's going through, and him kind of trying to get back together with his kids, and all of there's a lot more. It's not just fun. There's emotion there too, which helps lift the story up.
This one for me was it ramps up. Like, it starts off and it kind of does its thing, and then suddenly it just kind of starts to shift into gear, and it just accelerates, and it doesn't let off all the way to the end. And in some ways, it reminded me of Rings of Akhenaten, whatever that one is, because it kind of has that same energy, where it starts off and it's just an adventure, but then as the plot thickens and this big level threat comes, and it becomes this swelling chorus of emotion at the end of that episode. That's what this one really reminded me of. And you're right, Glenn. This just, wow, did this cement the companions of the 11th Doctor perfectly into their roles and how everybody would react to things. And the absolutely heartbreaking idea of this planet tearing itself apart, and this just one thing, just take one thing just to salvage it, and not being able to. I mean, it's like, I don't know, it's like the library at Alexandria all over again. I mean, it's to that level of, I'm still upset over that, and I wasn't around for it. It's to that level of oh no. And through it all is the 11th Doctor, and the pitch perfect tones that came from him, and the wonderful twist at the end when Leonard is, what was all this just to teach me a lesson?
Yeah.
And you suddenly went, oh no.
Isn't it? Isn't it fascinating, though? That's what I liked about this story, that a lot of times not a lot of times, but sometimes the Doctor is putting people in situations to sort of make them rethink or think about themselves, or reflect on themselves, or teach, Christmas Carol is a very good example of teaching a lesson. This is one of those situations where it's not the Doctor, it's the universe. I really believe that the universe had a hand in making sure Leonard was on this trip, and the Doctor had nothing to do with it. It was completely unintentional on the Doctor's part, and this was the universe teaching or illustrating a point to Leonard. And I think he does learn something from it, even though that lesson doesn't come directly from the 11th Doctor. It comes from the situation that he's thrust upon in the end. And I liked it. I thought it was good.
Yeah.
Yeah, one more for the TARDIS taking him where he needs to be.
Right. All right, let's move on to Kiss of the Dybbuk, Tale of the Fourth Doctor by Russell McGee.
Oh, this was the submarine one.
Yeah, was it a sub?
Wasn't it?
I assumed it was a boat or freighter. Oh yeah, okay. I was gonna say I didn't get anything that said sub, but maybe it was, and I just didn't. Yeah.
It opened on a sub, but the Fourth Doctor was not on a sub. He was on the freighter.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed this story. I think that I figured out very early on in which character the Dybbuk was possessing or inside of. So there was no surprise there. My biggest complaint about this story, my biggest complaint about this story is it's very horror fan rock. And don't get me wrong, horror fan rock is a fantastic story, but it's one of those stories where the doctor and the companion show up and effectively do nothing other than piece together what's happening, give us a narrative of what's going on in this particular situation, and then leave after everybody else is dead. It was very much in that vein, and that has never set well with me with horror fan rock. Everything else about horror fan rock is great, but that's never set well with me. So when this one turns out to be the same way, and not only that, is with my favorite doctor and my favorite companion, then it bothered me a little bit that it came to that. But this is another one where I really felt like the story carries you along so well that I'm a little forgiving of the ending leaving it that way, but I'm a little forgiving of that because of that.
It's very equivalent to, and I'm a champion of horror fang rock like everybody else. I love that story, and I don't mind the occasional darker turns where they show up and nothing they do is effective, that everybody gets offed anyway, and it's up to these two to be the saviors and defeat the Rutan or whatever it happens to be in story of the week. I think where this one maybe falls down just a little bit is the fact that it's predestined.
Yeah.
That the doctor knows, nobody survived. The ship was found adrift with nobody on board, that everybody was dead. Well, see you later. I mean, he might as well have left because there was nothing they could have done at that point. And if you're going to give me that, well, let me root for something.
Right,
let me, give me somebody to get out of it, that the doctor can maybe change that one thing, Give me Pompeii.
I sort of expected that to happen because of the fact that the doctor knew that this was predestined, and the story even goes a step further by giving us the American Beauty. I'm dead. by showing us the ship when the rescue crew comes upon the ship. It's the ship. It's the end of this story, or later after this story has happened. So he's already telegraphed to us that nobody on this ship makes it, and so that even cements more of the predeterminedness of this when the doctor and Sarah shows up and he realizes that what happens here. He knows what happens here. So
I guess I viewed it a little differently, and while it is a predestined situation and kind of similar to Fang Rock, I don't feel like the doctor and Sarah don't do anything because they stop the Dybbuk from spreading beyond this boat, just as they kind of stop the Rotan from invading the rest of Earth.
Well, that's a good point. Yeah, I hadn't considered that.
It's still the situation. Yeah, they don't help anybody that we're encountering, but they're still stopping a bigger picture situation from happening.
That's a good point.
So in that aspect, I liked it too.
I'll give you that. No, again, I don't take anything away from the story because again, the width and depth of these people being able to, I was really impressed with just about all of the stories with how well they captured the voice of these characters, and this was so Elizabeth Sladen and Tom Baker,
and very Hinchcliffe.
So very much, and yes, very much the Hinchcliffe trappings of the Hammer horror style. Which we're going to do a Tom Baker story to get how to do a Hammer horror style. It's just, you could do a Douglas Adams, but why? You could do it. You could do a Hammer horror.
Yeah.
I was a little surprised it wasn't in The Dog. I thought briefly that I was with you, Glenn. I kind of knew who.
The Thing.
Yeah, I thought maybe we'd get a nod to The Thing, but.
I thought.
Otherwise, I was like, no, it's this guy.
I had it between two. I thought Professor. I was pretty certain, but I also thought it could have been Gibson. I really kind of thought, okay, perhaps it is Gibson because he's sometimes he's not there when I think he should be because he's off getting somebody or conveying somebody else. But there was at one point that I just really thought it's got to be the professor because he's the one that's in the room when this happens. So, although I suppose Gibson was in the room when the first guy did it. So, all right, let's move on to Something at the End of the Lane: A Tale of the First Doctor by Kevin Mason. I'm going to let somebody else start because I have only one reservation about this story, and I'll talk about it after you guys have given your reviews.
Well, I think I would have liked the story had they not started it where it made it seem like it was their actual departure. Like if...
You mean getting home?
Yeah,
Okay.
like them getting home departure. Like, because it feels like it should be, oh, that's the beginning, or that's the end of, I'm blanking on the name of that story now.
The chase.
Yeah, the chase. But it kind of takes a turn, and it's not, and it feels kind of like a cheat in the fact that it isn't. I feel like they should have said it, like, further in the future or further in the past. Like, they were just off enough, but it comes across like it's still like 66. So it's that's my biggest complaint of it. The idea of them walking down this alley with everybody and time causing issues, and this parasite that's feeding on the time energy left behind from them leaving. That's a cool idea. I just having it framed around them, their departure from the TARDIS. I don't know. Part of that didn't set well with me.
Well, I'm going to jump in front of Sean then because I doesn't sound like he thinks the same thing. I agree with you 100%. This is exactly what I was going to bring up. Is I will just echo everything that you said. I won't restate that, but I will add to it that it almost makes that jubilant scene at the end of the chase with the montage of just that joy that they're experiencing, that they're home. It almost cheapens that because, yes, this where they end up wasn't technically home for them, but it just, if you were already sort of there and you got that close, it almost feels like it may not have been as jubilant or exciting when they finally do get home at the end of the chase. And so I think it kind of cheapened that a bit for me.
Yeah, and I think that something like that could have been resolved if we didn't have that long, oh, let's go have coffee as a goodbye sort of situation.
Right.
The long drawn out goodbye, had they shown up, wait, is this 1960? Wait, what's going on over there? That doesn't seem right. And jump straight into the what's strange.
What's wrong,
and,
yeah.
Yeah, that this is our time, but it's not right. That would have made things, I think, a little easier to swallow.
I agree. What do you think, Sean?
I don't disagree with you guys. Starting this one, it felt a little chaotic with the time frame because there was some legit confusion on my part as to, is this story meant to be set within that section of them leaving? But I couldn't make the, it was just different enough that it wasn't lining up right. And so I had to kind of set that aside and go, okay, no, this is a different attempt to get them home. And then we get into the bleed through from other timelines, which was very interesting and I thought very well handled, with these ghostly images coming back into the past. And then we get to the very cool idea of the time parasite. That was nifty. I loved that.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this kind of jubilant moment at the end where we were there. We were almost home. We touched it. We'll get back there again. And that, to me, that line was kind of what allowed the smoothing over and the return to jubilation for when they get there in the chase. because they're kind of, it's not just the jubilation that we made it, it's the jubilation that we were right, we had faith in the Doctor, and he did get us home for real. So that was where I kind of connected those dots. And so, and maybe it's just because I love Ian and Barbara so much that they pushed my happy button, so I was happy with it.
And I did love the idea that they chose to leave instead of the Doctor choosing for them this time.
Yeah.
That they got to choose to save the world essentially instead of staying behind and being home. I did like that.
Because it's such an Ian and Barbara thing that they would do.
Yeah.
You know, it's come on, let's go. I mean, we're sad, but we'll get over it.
Right.
And I thought Ian was so diplomatic about it. He could have stewed. He could have been early season 1 Ian, where he's kind of grumpy about the Doctor being grumpy, and instead he's like, I have faith. You'll get us home. Yeah. And that for me is just kind of, it soothed it over, and it was, I think it kind of gave, in a weird way, I think it kind of gave the Doctor a shot of confidence too. Mm-hmm. It kind of feels like he really fed off of that, which you wouldn't think so from the first Doctor. But in many ways, the Doctor, all the incarnations of the Doctor are always seeking the approval, which is why they bring the companions along to show off how brilliant they are. And so, that's kind of the, yes, you have faith in me, therefore I will have faith in myself, and we will go and do the thing. Right. And so, I don't know, it ended on enough of an uptick that I was okay with a couple of bumps at the beginning.
They all say, who is Doctor Who?
Do you collect Doctor Who? Do you have Doctor Who items and you don't know you collect Doctor Who? For all things in the Doctor Who collecting world, tune in to the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast, a Direction Point Network podcast. I am Larry Van Rosbergen, your host, and I have been collecting Doctor Who for 40 years. With popular features like collection protection and the most outrageous offer, we have a lot of fun. Available anywhere you get your podcasts. You're listening to Traveling the Vortex, a Direction Point Network podcast.
All right, let's move on to Consequences, a tale of the 10th Doctor by James Hornby.
I don't remember this one at all.
I am struggling with this one as well. This was the one with the... Why don't I remember this one?
This was the guy who was a child in the street during an attack.
Oh.
And the Doctor saved him instead of his family.
His parents, yeah.
And then he went out of his way to blame the Doctor.
Yeah. Well, he's living in this like almost constant torment. And I think that this is written in such a way that I think that the author's trying to be sort of poetic with was his name Evan, was how he was experiencing this, that at times I felt like it was a little, this was another one that I felt that maybe unnecessarily was being a little too descriptive. But I think that he's kind of trying to paint a surreal picture, and how Evan is, living with this torment for so many years. And so I think there's something to be said for how he wrote it. It made it very difficult to read and follow for me, to be quite honest, the way that it's done. And yeah, I mean, I think Evan's meant to come to realize that the Doctor really wasn't. Is this the one where he ends up
he saves
the first
him
Doctor
instead of the family?
No, the 10th Doctor saves Evan as a child.
Yes.
And Evan's upset about it. And it's not until we get to the end of the story that the 10th Doctor reveals that it's a timey-wimey situation
Evan
where he met the wrong order.
Yeah.
And so from the Doctor's perspective, all he knows about Evan is what Evan's been ranting about.
Right.
You saved me instead of my family. Why did you do that? And the Doctor doesn't have an explanation for it because for him it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
And so then later he goes back and has to save Evan because that's the decision that's been made.
Correct.
And I liked the story, but I feel like there was a lot. And this is something that I think we've kind of discussed on the podcast before with bootstrap paradoxes, where this happens, so therefore this has to happen because this happened.
Cause and
And
effect.
anytime we get into those, it's one of those things where you run the risk of being almost too clever.
Yeah.
And I think this was one of those instances where there was a lot to try and hang on that one paragraph of explanation about, oh, we met in the wrong order. This happened first. And you get there and it's kind of like, oh, okay. But I don't know that necessarily fixes the inherent struggles that we got to get there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It's not that it's a bad story by any stretch of the imagination. It's a good story. It just doesn't quite gel, I think, as well as because of that bootstrap action going on.
Mm-hmm.
But that's me. I'm kind of soured on the whole bootstrap paradox thing.
Right. All right, let's move on to The Harvesters, A Tale of the Second Doctor, or Doctor Who Meets Aliens, by R. Morgan, boy, this last name, Cryfield, I'm going to say. R. Morgan Cryfield. So R. Morgan here decided that he got the second Doctor, so what do? Base Under Siege. And that's really all this is.
Story.
I
liked it.
Yeah, and I almost predicted that you were going to say that because you are very much.
I'm the Base Under Siege guy.
You are. You're very much the apologist for that entire era being Base Under Siege for the most part.
Keith is the 11th Doctor's in this. Oh, 5 stars across the board. I'm the, hey, it's a Base Under Siege story. Rock on.
I don't know. It was a good story. It just felt a little too cookie cutter for me. It felt like it was borrowing tropes and themes from other fiction. And I mean, it all comes together really well. It does do a tremendous job of separating our, characters and making you kind of wondering how, number one, they're going to survive this, and number two, come back together eventually at the end, which they do, which is done well. But it just felt a little tried and true for me, a little too cookie cutter, but it's a good story. I can't fault him. He still wrote a good story, despite the fact that you're using elements from other things.
Was this story supposed to be set like the next one after The Wheel in Space? Because I felt like Zoe wasn't quite right. Like she felt too robotic almost throughout most of the story.
Well,
if not right after, it was very early. For sure.
I didn't get that, but that would make sense because she still was very much the scholarly nerd.
The mathematician aspect of it. Because I thought he had the voice of the second Doctor and Jamie down great. I just didn't feel like he nailed it with Zoe from what I'm used to experiencing Zoe anyways.
I forget. Have we reviewed Wheel in Space?
We did.
We did.
But I can't remember what story's next.
After
and I
Wheel?
feel like, after Wheel. And I feel like she kind of drops the mathematician stuff right after Wheel.
I don't know if I'd go that far. I mean, there's still plenty of evidence that Zoe's in some ways smarter than the Doctor.
The Dominators is probably the next one, right?
In this, she's talking about, well, blah, 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 there was, I'd seen a quote that it sounded like it was coming from C-3PO more than Zoe.
Well, she makes reference to human interactions I know the quote you're talking about, and that's what led me to believe that it's still relatively early. If it's not the immediate next story, it's pretty early on.
Immediate next story.
But she's being almost she's being almost more cold, and I know I got your point. She's seems more cold and robotic than she even does in Wheel of Space, to be quite frank.
Yeah, it's true.
She's also very matter of fact with some things too, and then sometimes she's very much in the thick of it. So she was a little uneven in that way too. I don't know.
That was my only complaint with the story, because I enjoyed it otherwise.
Maybe didn't quite get Zoe down, but all the rest of it was pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, next is A Night in Santa's Workshop, a tale of the Ninth Doctor by Richard Peavers and James Silverstar. Oh boy.
I'm going to take that to mean you did not enjoy this one.
I should have liked it. It's Christmas, but I don't know. I think it was the jumping around of it that didn't sit well with me. Somebody else start.
I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the story a lot, and how it resolved itself, and this idea of these I mean, for a moment, I thought maybe we were actually dealing with a legit vampire.
Oh yeah.
You know, from you know me, any excuse to go back to State of Decay. But I enjoyed those elements of the story. The editing on this one with the jumping back and forth.
Yeah.
Yes, I feel like that left
tough.
something to be desired, because it was such a jarring, and you kind of had to keep resetting your brain as to where you were at within the sequence of events. And I don't know that it was needed. I think you could have just told the story linearly.
It could have been
and it would have been
linearly.
fine.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, there wasn't any big reveal that was trying to be held back. It was, yeah.
Yeah, because you know everything you need to know about her by page 2. And it just...
Bad guy. Got it.
Yeah. So it's funny that you say about the vampire thing, because my brain kind of went there as well, because when I first read Carnivore, I read it as Hemivore. And I was like, oh, so this is, and that's where my brain went was, Curse of Fenric, and not, and then I was like, oh, wait a minute, this is Carnivore. And then I thought, well, what a generic villain name, Carnivore. I mean, that's just somebody that eats meat. And yeah, that's kind of what she's doing. But I don't know, I thought it was a little too on the nose too. I mean, come up with a crazy name for the species or whatever. I think it is. I think they are alluded to something else later too, but it just, I don't know.
Sometimes the Time Lords had off days. Like whoever, who was it that named the fly? What's it doing? Flying. Yeah, okay, that's good. We'll call it that.
Yeah, good point. All right, I'll take your point there. It's very much though in the nature of the Ninth Doctor to, despite the fact that this is a ravenous species, is it Canlet? Is that what her name was? Her being the last and her spawn being the last, sort of the Doctor wanting to, even after everything that had happened, the Doctor wanting to preserve that was very much in character with the Ninth Doctor, I thought. Unfortunately, well, I guess depending on how you look at it, unfortunately or unfortunately, it doesn't come to fruition, but...
Shades of Boomtown.
Yeah. Well, yeah, sure. It certainly is. Although, what's her name from Boomtown at least had a little bit of remorse and caring because of her pregnancy, or the other gal's pregnancy, but this gal had this guy had no remorse. Once she was ready just to take everything out, she didn't care. She the survival of her species was pretty much it.
Whenever I read something that has, and it comes up frequently with vampire lore, and I don't know if it's a line from a movie that stuck with me, or if it's just, I've kind of always had to put myself into that mindset, because they're presented as pure evil. And yet, from the carnivore's point of view, you are debating with cattle. I mean, that's the way she looks at it. Is, it would be the same as if we were to go into a field and have a discussion with Hamburger. It's just, at what point do you just not care about having that discussion because you want a hamburger? And she's kind of right there. So there's a certain pass in some ways that some of these carnivorous parasitic creatures kind of have to get, just because. And I thought the Doctor did a good job of pointing that out. It's in their nature. She's going about it the wrong way. We can take you to this planet and do this, and she's like, that's not living. That's me eking out an existence. And that you can debate the ethics of that till the cows come home. But I thought she made a compelling argument in some regard for.
Sure. Yeah.
No, man. No, I'm just gonna do my thing.
Yeah.
But other than the editing, I thought it was good.
All right. Next is Sepulchred Soul, A Tale of the Seventh Doctor by James Silverstar. And this, I was actually getting parts of this.
I think it's Sylvester.
Did I? Oh yeah,
James
Sylvester.
Silverstar.
Sorry,
you mentioned that on the last one.
It is Sylvester. Yeah,
from?
you're right. It's just James Sylvester. I don't know why I read that as Silverstar. It is James Sylvester. It's probably because I was so worried about getting sepulchered wrong.
I am impressed with. That's one of those words I looked at and my brain just went, nope.
Yeah. Well, I
moved on.
I think isn't a sepulcher like a burial ground or a burial? That's what I took it as what it meant. This is the one I was actually getting this confused. I was getting earlier when we were talking about that 10th Doctor story. I had taken and supplanted the revelation of the end of this one with that one, and so I'd gotten myself a little confused until we got back on track. You guys got me back on track on remembering this. This is the one where this one. The other one is too, but this was another one of those ones that I felt was very much written in a way that it was being a little too descriptive in order to kind of maybe hide what's really happening here. And although I think it's revealed a little early on, or at least I suspected that the grandfather and the girl were the first Doctor and Susan. It's not overtly stated, but I think I kind of suspected that's who they were, and that this was the seventh Doctor looking back on something that happened to him in the past. So that didn't come as much of a surprise, but this was another one that I thought was just a little too over descriptive of what it needed to be, and I think it could have had a little simpler approach to the story, but it also feels very much like this author is channeling a lot of the style of writing from and I know you guys don't have a lot of experience, but with the Virgin New Adventures, the Seventh Doctor trying to kind of approach it with sort of a mysterious front and kind of not let you know what's really going on until much later, when you have to kind of piece together what's happening here. And so this is very much in the vein of that. So I appreciated it for that, because I have appreciated some of that stylized writing in those books. But on the flip side, I really felt that he was getting a little far too descriptive and muddled in some of the ways he was presenting things.
Yeah, he may have been a little overly descriptive, but I think it's also kind of a fairly simple story that leads to making you want to be a little more descriptive to make it a little bit longer.
Yeah.
So if you kind of cut out a little bit of those descriptions, it's going to be a lot shorter of a story. And so I didn't mind the descriptiveness of it, because it also helps instead of saying that's the first Doctor and Susan, it goes, right. Oh, is it not? And
it's meant to mask that revelation. Yeah.
It's interesting that you confused this with the 10th Doctor story momentarily, because structurally they are very similar. They both deal with an event that happened, that had to happen, but we can't talk about it until we get to the point where, we are now, in order to solve the problem. And I don't know, maybe I enjoyed the story a lot. It made me wish that I had come off of Curse of Fenric a little more recently than whenever the last watch through I did of that one was, because I feel like I probably missed a lot of the descriptors that you're complaining about. I think were probably there to set the tone and recapture the atmosphere of Fenric. And I feel like maybe if, going back to it as a sequel, I think maybe that would help if I'd gone back and rewatched it and then read the story. That would have been like, okay, I see where he's going now. And again, I liked the story a lot.
Yeah.
And I loved his portrayal of Ace.
Yeah,
Ace
absolutely.
was the kind of the anchor
Yeah.
that totally made this thing work. The portrayal and again the voice.
Well, and her honesty, her steadfast honesty that he needs to know, he needs to understand, sort of thing. I thought was really unique and very cool.
It definitely had that feel of last season and Virgin New Adventures.
I'm glad you said that about Fenric, because I think you're right. I think that's what this was trying to invoke, was that same sort of atmosphere and style that we were getting in, near the end, and all the much more reason why I appreciate the fact that Ace was pushing the Doctor to be honest with this guy, because it was look at her having been sort of in the same situation where she was sort of the subject of manipulation in those stories, and now she doesn't want somebody else to be reliving sort of that mystery of what it was all about. And so she's saying you have to tell him, you have to be honest with him about what's happening here. So yeah, no, I liked the story. I thought it was good, but yeah, I think there was just, I think I'm going to give it. You guys have talked me out of it. I think that the over descriptiveness those probably sets the mood for the story. And this one's probably, it was very necessary.
Yeah, I would think so.
All right, and then Emotion Quotient, A Tale of the 13th Doctor by Rob Nisbet.
This one I thought had a very clever idea behind it, but I don't feel like they stuck the landing as far as why all of this kicks off.
Well,
like why she was able to freeze time. I didn't feel like they kind of thoroughly explained that well enough. Or did I just miss something?
Well, no, this is one with a girl who's, weren't they in like some sort? They were sort of an accident or something, right? And she's like kind of frozen in time. And the Doctor's trying to figure out this whole time of why she's time locked or whatever. And the mother who has that I don't know. This one was weird. It had the corporation that she was like trying to create robots so we're basically in her image kind of thing, and it was like there was this disconnect between the daughter and the mother until this happens. The daughter becomes time frozen, and then they sort of build up the company around her, don't they?
Yeah, a little bit.
Well, they're still trying to,
and the Doctor provides a lot of stuff to allow the robots to be built further.
Right.
And
giving them emotion, and yeah.
It's another bootstrap paradox, because it's the TARDIS encounters this cloud thing.
That's what it was.
Disrupts the systems.
Yes. That's what it was.
So they go down and they find the girl who's now time locked and stuck and frozen in time. And so while they're trying to figure out what is wrong or how she became stuck, as it were, one of the company's mainstays is, the social media, the phones, the tablets, and putting an intelligent AI into that, so that you have a way of interfacing with it that feels very natural and becomes intuitive. That was the big word. They used intuitive several times throughout there. So as the Doctor begins tinkering and comes up with this emotion quotient using a piece of TARDIS crystal in the design specs for when she's putting things together, the AI gets to the point 23 years down the road where it is intuitive. And it is kind of the ultimate joke of, well, what if you could just tell Google, I wish I could do this, and Google would go, oh, okay, and find a way to make that happen. That's what this thing does. When the girl's going, stop, 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 stop. I just, I wish I could. And she does. She reaches out to the, to the cloud, and it intuitively goes, okay, and does it because it has that piece of the TARDIS in it.
Right.
That allows her to be frozen. And the whole shebang hinges on the idea that she's going to talk to her mom about the fact that she's pregnant, and she's worried about, the disapproving look that mom's going to give her, which the doctor, I thought that was obvious right off the bat. I don't know. Just as soon as she was going on about how this conversation was going to take place, in my mind, it was either, well, you're coming out or you're pregnant.
Or
Those
you're
are kind of
pregnant,
the two options.
Those are the two options, yeah.
And when the guy sneaks into the thing and then gets chased off by security, that for me cemented it. It's like, okay, she's pregnant. That was the boyfriend come to check on her. The problem that I have with this, it's a great story, but the problem that I have with this is we get to the 23 years down the road, and the doctor makes the revelation that, oh yeah, I didn't think about it because I scanned and 2 heartbeats is normal for Time Lords. She's got 2 heartbeats. She's pregnant. And we take her out of the thing, and, because she has now reached the point where intuitively the machine knows that mom has reached a point where she's going to be okay with this, and they can have this conversation. So she gets out, and they go in to have this talk. 23 years. That's the problem I have with this. She was frozen for 23 years. Mom is now old.
Yeah.
Mom's dead, isn't she? She was AI.
Well, she was the assistant that walked her up to the office to talk to.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So she is now old. She's 23 years older, and one can only presume that the boyfriend is completely out of the picture. And how unfair is that the dude was willing to sneak into this secured facility to check on her? He obviously cared about her. He was concerned. But we're just going to write him out of the story, and he doesn't get to be involved in. I mean, it's 23 years later. He probably.
Well, we don't know what happened after.
Wife, and
we don't know what happened after. Maybe she went to contact him, run him down.
For 23 years.
Yeah.
And now it's.
No, that's a good point. Yeah.
He's going to be 23 years older than she is now. So I don't see how that family dynamic can work. If she did, it just left me with a lot of. But what about? Kind of questions when I got to the end. And so I don't think the resolution worked for me. I liked the story beyond that. And it just seems like, especially the tinkering, that's just something that the 13th Doctor in particular would, oh, yeah, you needed help setting your clock radio on your VCR. So I built you an IMAX theater, It's that level of what? that she would just kind of go off and do the thing. So
right. Yeah, no, that's a good point. I just the for some reason the time difference or the length of that didn't really kind of set with me until you just kind of pointed that out. And I was like, that's a good point. It's a little bit that doesn't set well with me now either.
Yeah,
that's the only thing that I don't like about it is that it's like, okay, so we're just going to go from here. You have a time machine. You could take her home.
Go back 23 years.
You could fix this now that mom knows what's coming. But okay, I guess we're going to go with this.
And then finally, Old Acquaintances, A Tale of the Eighth Doctor, or Somebody Who Was Not Happy with How They Left It in the Movie, by Hamish Crawford.
Hamish, I would like to take this opportunity on behalf of all of us here at Traveling the Vortex to thank you for this story.
A hearty handshake you deserve.
Well, it was bold. It was a very bold movie. The way taking all of the things it's almost like somebody said, there's a lot of loose ends that need to be tied up here. And they thought, this is my opportunity to do that.
for every single time that we've wondered, how did the master get out of the IR Harmony? This guy went, I know how he did it. And I'm going to tell you. I don't know about you guys. Saving the best for last.
Yeah.
This
I
was
agree.
fantastic. And I know we're all big fans of the Eighth Doctor. We're all big fans of the TV movie. So maybe there's a little bit of glossing over and the nostalgia button being pushed. And I don't care. I loved this story.
Even so far as to, answer question C or what.
Yeah.
Touches on all of that. The amount of detail he goes into for this story.
And Grace.
Yeah.
Getting amazing Grace back. And I love the fact that the guy, I can't think of his name, but the former guy is kind of sniffing around again, going, well, maybe we should do this.
Brian? Was that his name?
Is it Brian? And she's just kind of rolling her eyes, and then she gets this note in her handwriting. Would you excuse me a moment? I love it.
Well, and the Grace early on second guessing whether she made the right decision. I think to not stay with the Doctor, I thought was interesting.
Well, because how could you not?
Right.
I mean, how could you? I mean, we've often talked about the people who don't go.
Right.
And how could you wake up the next day and be satisfied with that decision?
Am I really going to do amazing things? Yeah.
But there was just and I love exploration of the TARDIS stories.
Yep.
And so we got that.
Lysandra.
Getting Lysandra.
The time lady who at one point encounters the Master, and I thought she was there, and I think maybe this was part of it. I thought she was there to recruit him to help with the Time War.
Yeah.
Because she makes mention of that we need people like you. And I thought, wow, is this just all a ruse to come collect the Masters so that they can use him in the Time War? And she's certainly there for more than just that. But when she got to that point and had that conversation, I thought, wow, this is just like, yeah, this is how they wanted him for the Time War. They wanted all hands on deck, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I confess to not being as well versed. I had to go and look this up. The alternate Eighth Doctor that appears in one of the divergent timelines apparently is a comic version. And Glenn, you probably are nodding your head going, yeah, I know all about this.
I don't know all about it, but I'm vaguely familiar, yes.
There is a comic image of this other Doctor with the goatee, and he does kind of look like Paul McGann.
Yeah,
but
yeah. The Eighth Doctor's he's
coming
about
soon to Traveling the Vortex.
He's about as chaotic as Ace's timeline, to be honest with you. Anyway, yes. So back to this story.
But it gave me hope that the seed is planted for you to finally write the combination of all the different Ninth Doctors story that you keep threatening.
Right.
Because I feel like there's a springboard idea here for how that would work.
Yeah.
With this divergent time. But man, I love that story.
Yeah. Well, and
definitely the best of the box.
Yeah, and we get a companion that the Doctor hasn't met yet and will never meet, which I think was an interesting concept on that as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's just,
How do we feel about the kiss at the end?
I
wasn't surprised by it.
I don't think I was either, and probably because this author was writing a love letter to the movie and tying up loose ends, and really felt like he got it. It's like so many people complain about the half human on my mother's side. They complain about the kiss. They complain. It really felt like he sort of got it. I think he's in the same camp as us, that there's nothing wrong with a lot of that. It's just, yeah, no, I was fine with it. I was completely fine with it.
I expected. I don't know what I read it, and there was a part of me that wanted to. I don't know how to put this. Like, I think a part of my brain expected part of my brain to be outraged and upset by it. Like, oh, what a cheap shot that you're going to go back and have them snog again. And the rest of my brain was like, shut up. You don't feel that way. You're totally okay with it. And I love the fact that when she calls him out on it early, just like, well, you've been cavorting and doing all this stuff. He goes, oh, yeah, I enjoyed it. I think she did too. just so very matter of fact. And again, I could hear Paul McGann delivering these lines in that snark, and just, man, this story was so great.
Yeah.
You occasionally you do things, and again, my hat's off to you, sir, because you sometimes you read things and you go, man, I wish I'd have written that.
Yeah.
This is one of those. Man, I wish I'd have written this. That's how good it is.
Or even just came up with the idea of it. I mean,
yeah, warm butterflies.
Agreed. Overall, pretty good collection of stories. There wasn't anything in here I hated. I thought the authors in this really feel like Keith and I were talking about this a little bit before. Everybody did a really good job with this book, but it does feel like a lot of new authors. It feels like a lot of people getting their feet wet for the first time, and it feels like a lot of people that are early in their writing careers. But that does not in any way diminish the stories in here and how well they're done, and not to mention the incredible charity, this being a work of charity and you'll have to remind me who this is supporting.
I suppose we should mention that all proceeds from the sale of this book go to Settled. Settled is an independent charity that is providing free and trustworthy information, advice, and support in different languages to EU citizens in the UK. As the UK leaves the European Union, EU citizens must make an application to stay in the UK. Settled helps ensure that those citizens will gain settled status and to respond to the difficulties that they face. So directly dealing with the fallout of Brexit, as it were. But anytime you're doing something for charity, it's a worthwhile endeavor.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, absolutely.
And this is, again, we should mention, it's still available through the Pencil Tip Publishing website, along with Temporal Logbook 1 and 2, I believe you can still get as well, which I was not involved with, so I don't know if that colors your perceptions any.
Boy, his ego was in check the whole time until just now, wasn't it?
Until just then, right?
You are invited on an adventure across all of time and space, in a completely random order. It's the Police Box in the Junkyard podcast. Jump in the TARDIS with your hosts,
Eric Gulbranson, Asad Kheshki,
and
Matthew Kressel.
Explore Doctor Who TV stories, audio adventures, and books, both novels and non-fiction. The Police Box in the Junkyard podcast. It's the entire Whoniverse on shuffle. The Police Box in the Junkyard podcast is a member of the Direction Point Network and is available about once a month wherever you find your podcasts. You are listening to Traveling the Vortex.
All right, well, Sean, I'll put you on the spot here. If you can remember what's coming up on the schedule.
It's been so long. What were we reviewing? Oh, yeah, the Eighth Doctor. We're going to delve back into our year-long look, which has become
Year Plus.
Probably going to run Year Plus look at the Time War. And so we'll be doing the Big Finish's The Time War 3, a box set of stories, followed by Time War 4 and Short Trips, A Heart on Both Sides, which technically is 7.9. It's incredible to me to think that there's that many seasons of Short Trips out there. We just dipped our toes into those.
Yeah.
So much more stuff to review.
I think there's more than 7.
And then we will finish off with Classic Doctor's New Monsters, Day of the Vashta Narada, along with kind of recapping a few other stories from that line that we've already reviewed. and that will carry us through the end of Act 2 of the Time War.
All right.
And
Well,
you had a comic that you were going to throw in there at some point too. It's not on the schedule, but I don't remember now what it was. So.
Oh no, we had talked about it just came out, but we talked about next year reviewing the comic that continues it picks up right after Power of the Daleks or Power of the Doctor with the 14th Doctor. It's in the latest Doctor Who magazine.
Oh, okay.
It appears to be ongoing as well for a while. So it looks like this wasn't the first installment. It looks like there's going to be a few more installments before we get to the 60th anniversary. So this appears to me that this is bridging the gap between Power of the Doctor and the first 60th anniversary special that we'll get next year. So obviously we'll put that on the schedule at some time in our lead up to the 60th anniversary, but that'll still be down the road.
It seems like just yesterday we were getting excited over the 50th.
I know.
That's true. It doesn't seem like it's been all that long ago. All right, well, you can still find us at our website, travelingthevortex.com. If you get any value out of this podcast, why not consider putting some value back into it? You can do that by becoming a patron and click on that patron link on our website. Consider supporting us. We appreciate all of those who are already supporting us, and we are doing our best to churn out some special materials that is exclusive to our patrons supporters. So be on the lookout. More's coming soon, we promise. Also consider giving us a 5-star review wherever you subscribe to the podcast. It helps bump us up in the ratings and recommendations. And of course, make sure you join in the conversation as our listeners forum on Facebook. Anything else that we need to touch on before we close this one out? If not, until next time, I'm Glenn.
I'm Sean.
And I'm Keith.
Cheers.
Good night, everybody.
Be seeing you.
Thanks for listening.
You have been listening to Traveling the Vortex. Doctor Who and all of its associated programs are owned and trademarked by the BBC. No infringement is intended or implied.
Direction point! Direction point!
A Doctor Who podcast network.